I read my sister's demand for only homemade food and chose absolute silence. At 7 minutes past 8 on Thanksgiving night, my father texted to ask where the turkey was because the whole family was waiting. I laughed dryly at my screen. Since this was not the first time they conveniently forgot, I said no. This year they would not get a bird. Instead, I prepared a surprise that would finally expose the ugly truth behind her perfect hashtag. My name is Lily Scott, and the silence in my apartment in Briar Falls, Ohio, was the loudest thing I had heard all day. It was not the empty, lonely silence that people often associate with spending a major holiday alone. It was a heavy, deliberate silence, the kind that settles in after a war has been quietly declared. I sat at my small kitchen table, wrapped in an oversized gray sweatshirt that had seen better days, staring down at a bowl of reheated chili. The red kidney beans and ground beef were lukewarm, the result of a microwave cycle that I had cut short because I simply did not care enough to wait another 30 seconds. The television was off. The only sound in the room was the low, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator compressor kicking on and off, marking the passage of time in a way that felt almost hypnotic. Outside my window, the November wind was whipping through the streets, stripping the last of the dead leaves from the maples, but inside, the air was still. It was the calm before the storm, or perhaps it was the eye of the hurricane. I took a slow spoonful of chili, tasting the metallic tang of the canned tomatoes, and glanced at my phone sitting face up on the table. The screen was dark, but I knew what was waiting for me behind the lock screen. I knew because the ghost of the last notification was still burned into my retinas. It was exactly 7 minutes past 8 in the evening. In a normal world, in a normal family, 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving night meant the meal was winding down. It meant unbuttoning the top button of your jeans, picking at the last remnants of pumpkin pie, and arguing over who would do the dishes while football played in the background. But the Scott family did not operate on normal time, nor did we operate on normal logic. We operated on Kendra time. My phone lit up, shattering the dim calm of the kitchen. It was a text from my father. Ron. The preview message flashed across the screen, demanding attention with the urgency of a heart attack. Where is the turkey? The oven is hot. Everyone is waiting. I stared at the capital letters. I could hear his voice in my head, booming and thick with the assumption that his desires were commands that the universe, and specifically his youngest daughter, had to obey. I let out a dry, scratchy laugh that sounded foreign to my own ears. It was a laugh void of humor, born entirely of disbelief. They were actually waiting. They were sitting there, in my parents' dining room with the expensive tablecloth and the good silver, staring at an empty spot in the center of the table, genuinely expecting me to walk through the door with a 20-pound golden brown bird. They had forgotten the word no, or rather, they had chosen to treat my no as a temporary glitch in the system, a little bit of static on the line that would clear up if they just ignored it long enough. I picked up the phone, the glass cool against my fingertips. I unlocked it and opened the group chat, scrolling up past my father's demand to the message that had started this entire Cold War 3 weeks ago. It was from my sister, Kendra. She had renamed the group chat Scott Turkey Squad, with a turkey emoji, because everything in her life had to be branded, even family coercion. Her message from November 1st was still there, glowing with self-righteousness. Rules for this year. No store-bought food. Only homemade. We want this to be authentic and from the heart. Love you guys. She had included a little leaf emoji, the kind of decorative flourish she probably thought softened the blow of her dictatorship. I read it again, savoring the irony. Authentic, from the heart. I scrolled down a little further to my own reply, sent 2 days later after I had checked my work schedule at the Rivergate Emergency Response Unit. I had been polite. I had been reasonable. I had typed out a clear, concise message explaining that I was working 3 12-hour shifts in a row leading up to Thanksgiving, including an overnight shift the day before. I had explained that I would be exhausted and that I physically did not have the time to brine, prep stuff, and roast a massive turkey, I had offered a solution that any rational human being would have accepted with gratitude. I offered to buy a premium, slow-smoked turkey from the best smokehouse in the county. It would have cost me over $100. It would have been delicious. The reply from Kendra had been immediate and dismissive. "That is cheating. Lily, the rule is the rule. If you buy it, it does not count. Mom and Dad are really looking forward to a traditional meal. Don't be lazy." Lazy. The word bounced around my brain as I looked at my father's new text demanding the bird. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week saving lives, pulling people out of car wrecks, and stabilizing heart attack victims in the back of a speeding ambulance. Kendra spent her days arranging throw pillows and filming her children reacting to things for her social media following, but I was the lazy one. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could feel the old instinct kicking in, that deeply ingrained reflex to apologize, to fix it, to rush over there with some excuse and try to salvage the evening. It was a muscle memory built over 35 years of being the reliable one, the one who absorbed the shock so the family structure would not fracture. But then I looked at the time again. 8:10 in the evening. They had waited until dinner was supposed to be served to check on me. They had not called yesterday to ask if I needed help. They had not texted this morning to wish me a happy Thanksgiving or ask when I was coming over. They just assumed I would comply. They assumed that my boundaries were made of smoke, easily blown away by the force of their expectations. I typed my response slowly, ensuring every letter was correct. I thought store-bought was not allowed. I hit send. I did not add an apology. I did not add an explanation. I did not add a sad face emoji. I just placed the phone face down on the table, next to my half-eaten chili. For a moment, nothing happened. The refrigerator hummed. The wind rattled the window pane. Then, the phone buzzed. A short, sharp vibration against the wood table. Then another, then a long, sustained vibration that meant someone was calling. I did not look. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape. I walked over to the kitchen counter where 2 plastic grocery bags were waiting. I had packed them an hour ago, but I had hesitated to leave, held back by a lingering thread of guilt. But that text from my father had severed the thread. It had snapped it clean. I reached into the first bag and pulled out a plastic container of potato salad. It had a bright orange sticker on the lid that screamed the name of the supermarket chain. It was mass-produced, filled with preservatives, and absolutely delicious. I pulled out a pecan pie from the second bag. It was in a flimsy aluminum tin with a clear plastic dome. The price tag, $12.99, was still stuck firmly to the center of the plastic. I made a mental note not to remove it. I was going to a Friendsgiving hosted by a colleague, a fellow paramedic named Sarah. Her rule for the night was simple: bring whatever you want, as long as you did not cook it yourself. We were all tired. We were all overworked. Nobody wanted to prove anything. We just wanted to eat and not talk about blood pressure or trauma alerts for 4 hours. The phone on the table was vibrating continuously now. It was doing a little dance across the wood surface, buzzing with the frantic energy of my mother's ringtone. I could picture the scene at my parents' house. The oven was empty. The table was set. The sides likely made by my mother because Kendra certainly did not cook were getting cold. The centerpiece, which I was sure Kendra had spent 3 days constructing out of pine cones and artisanal ribbon, was mocking them. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door. It was a heavy wool coat, necessary for the Ohio winter. As I buttoned it up, I looked back at the phone. The ringing stopped for a split second, then started again immediately. This time, the unique vibration pattern told me it was Kendra. She would be furious, not because she was hungry, but because I had ruined the aesthetic. I had ruined the schedule. I had created a void where there was supposed to be a prop. I walked back to the table, not to answer, but to silence the device completely. I flipped the little switch on the side of the phone. The vibrating stopped. The screen still lit up with Kendra's name, flashing like a warning beacon. But the silence returned to the room. It felt incredible. I took a deep breath, inhaling the stale air of the apartment, and it felt like fresh mountain oxygen. I picked up the phone and shoved it deep into my coat pocket. As I did, my thumb accidentally brushed the screen. waking it up one last time. It didn't open to the call, but to my photo gallery widget, which was cycling through memories from this day and previous years. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The image on the screen was from Thanksgiving exactly 1 year ago. It was a candid shot, or at least, it looked candid, in the foreground. Kendra was beaming. She was holding a glass of wine, her makeup flawless, wearing a beige cashmere sweater that looked soft and expensive. She was leaning against the kitchen island, looking effortlessly domestic. The lighting was perfect. She looked like the embodiment of a modern, successful mother hosting a beautiful holiday. But it was the background of the photo that made my stomach twist. Blurred in the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was me. I was hunched over the open oven door. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun that was falling apart. I was wearing a stained apron. My face was red and shiny with sweat. I looked exhausted. I looked like the hired help. I remembered that moment. I remembered begging Kendra to help me lift the roasting pan because my back was spasming from a 12-hour shift the day before. She had told me to wait a second because the lighting was really good right then. She had posted that photo with the caption, "So grateful for family traditions and a warm home, blessed homemade sisters." She hadn't even tagged me. I looked at the Lily in the photo, the tired, sweaty, compliant version of myself who thought that love meant servitude. Then I looked at my reflection in the darkened window of the apartment. I saw a woman in a winter coat holding a store-bought pie, ready to walk out the door and into a night where nothing was expected of her except her presence. "Not this year," I whispered to the empty room. My voice was steady. "This year. You direct the movie, Kendra. You film it yourself. You star in it. And you can cater it, too." I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the corridor smelled faintly of someone else's turkey. But it didn't make me hungry for what I was missing. I locked the door behind me, the deadbolt sliding home with a satisfying heavy click. It sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I walked down the stairs to the parking lot, my boots echoing on the concrete. The wind hit me as soon as I stepped outside, biting at my cheeks. But I didn't zip my coat up any higher. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel the cold reality of the night. I walked to my car, placed the grocery store salad and the cheap pie on the passenger seat with the reverence usually reserved for crown jewels, and started the engine. My phone was still in my pocket. I knew it was lighting up in the dark fabric, receiving text after text, voicemail after voicemail. My brother-in-law, Mason, was probably piling on now, sending messages about how selfish I was. My mother was probably crying, or performing the act of crying, wondering where she went wrong. My father was likely pacing, his anger growing with every passing minute that the oven remained empty. Let them pace, let them cry, let them text until their thumbs were sore. I backed out of the parking space and turned onto the main road, heading away from the suburbs where my parents lived and toward the downtown district where Sarah's loft was. As I drove, I turned on the radio. A classic rock station was playing something loud and rhythmic. I turned the volume up until the bass rattled the door panels. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bringing the turkey, I wasn't bringing the solution, I was bringing myself. And for tonight, that was going to have to be enough. The homemade rule had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. They wanted authentic. This was as authentic as it got. This was the real me, finally showing up by not showing up at all. To understand why I walked away from a family dinner that was supposedly mandatory, you have to understand the life I live when I'm not being commanded to roast poultry. I work as a shift supervisor for Rivergate Emergency Response, a private ambulance company that covers 3 counties. My life is measured in 12-hour blocks, and during flu season or icy winters, those blocks often bleed into 16 or 24 hours. My phone is not a device for leisure. It is a detonator. It goes off, and I have to move. I spend my days and nights listening to the terrified gasps of children with fevers of 104 degrees, the rattling chests of lifelong smokers who can no longer find oxygen, and the agonizing screams of teenagers pulled from wrecks on the interstate. I see human bodies at their most vulnerable, their most broken. I wipe blood off gurneys. I hold the hands of people who are taking their last breaths while their families scream in the background. When I clock out, I am not just tired, I am hollowed out. I am a shell that needs silence and sleep to regenerate enough humanity to do it all again the next day. But to the Scott family, my job was just a convenient explanation for why I was awake at odd hours, which meant I was available to solve their problems. My mother, Diane, spent 30 years working in a school cafeteria. She sees food as love, but she sees logistics as a nightmare she refuses to navigate. My father, Ron, was a mechanic for 40 years. He was a man who spoke with his hands, grease permanently etched into his fingerprints. But 3 years ago, a minor stroke took the strength from his right side. It was not enough to cripple him entirely, but it was enough to ruin his dexterity. He could no longer turn a wrench or hold a heavy skillet. The loss of utility turned him bitter. He did not ask for help. He demanded it, barking orders to cover the shame of his own limitations. Then there was Kendra. My sister is 31 years old, 4 years younger than me, but she acts like the matriarch of a dynasty that does not exist. She is a stay-at-home mother to 2 toddlers who are less like children and more like props for her social media feed. Kendra lives her life through a filter. She is the self-proclaimed queen of Pinterest, a woman who believes that if an event is not aesthetically pleasing enough to be posted online, it did not actually happen. Her husband, Mason, works in regional sales for a mid-sized beverage distributor. He is the kind of man who wears polo shirts that are too tight and agrees with whatever the loudest person in the room is saying. Usually, that person is Kendra. For years, I played a very specific role in this ensemble cast. I was the fixer. I was the safety net. I was the grease in the gears. Because I work in healthcare, I became the default medical transport service. When Dad needed to see his cardiologist at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, I was the one who got the call, not Kendra, who was home, but me. When I pointed this out, the response was always the same script, recited with maddening innocence. Lily, you work odd hours. You are free during the day. It did not matter that my free time during the day was actually my sleep time, because I had been working from 7 in the evening until 7 in the morning. To them, if I was not at a desk, I was doing nothing. Because I am single and childless, I became the default ATM for minor inconveniences and the default IT support. When the Wi-Fi router blinked red, I was summoned to unplug it and plug it back in. When Mom could not figure out how to upload a photo to Facebook, I had to drive 20 minutes to tap the screen for her. When Dad's blood pressure medication needed a copay of $40 and he didn't have cash, I paid it. I never asked for the money back, and they never offered. The phrases they used were like little daggers, sharp and efficient. You do not have kids. Lily, you do not understand how busy we are. It is just a small favor. Lily, family comes first. Lily, they weaponized my independence. They treated my lack of a husband and children not as a life choice or a circumstance, but as a void that needed to be filled with service to them. I was the aunt who brought the expensive gifts. I was the daughter who navigated the insurance companies. I was the sister who showed up early to set up and stayed late to clean up. I remember the Thanksgiving from 2 years ago with crystal clarity. It was the incident that started the crack in the foundation, even if I didn't realize it at the time. I had come off a 24-hour shift at 8 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day. We had been slammed with a multi-car pileup on the highway due to black ice. I had spent 6 hours triaging victims in freezing rain. My boots were still damp when I got home. I had just closed my eyes, desperate for 4 hours of sleep before dinner. When my phone rang, it was Kendra. She did not say hello. She did not ask how work was. She immediately launched into a crisis. She had forgotten to buy ice and heavy cream and the specific type of artisan crackers she needed for the charcuterie board. Mason was busy watching the game, and she couldn't leave the turkey. I told her I was sleeping. I told her I could barely keep my eyes open. Please, Lily, she had whined, her voice pitching up into that register that sounded like a distressed child. It will ruin the whole appetizer spread. You are coming anyway. Just stop on your way. It is on the way. It was not on the way. It required a 20-minute detour to the only grocery store that was open. A chaotic hellscape of desperate last-minute shoppers fighting over bruised yams. But I did it. I put my uniform back on because I was too tired to find real clothes. Drove to the store, fought the crowds, and spent $60 of my own money on high-end crackers and bags of ice. When I arrived at my parents' house, dragging 4 bags of ice in a grocery sack, nobody helped me at the door. I walked into the kitchen, sweating in my heavy coat, and dumped the ice in the sink. Kendra was standing there in a pristine apron, holding a glass of white wine. She looked at the ice, then at me. "You got the crushed ice," she said, a little frown creasing her forehead. I wanted the cubed ice. The crushed melts too fast. I stood there, blinking, feeling the adrenaline of rage mixing with exhaustion. Before I could speak, Mom walked in. She looked at the beautiful spread of food, the candles, the perfectly arranged table. "Oh, Kendra," she gushed, clapping her hands together. "You have outdone yourself. This is magical. You really are the best hostess." Kendra smiled, that modest, practiced smile she used for her profile pictures. "I try. Mom, I just want everything to be perfect for you guys." She didn't mention the ice I hauled. She didn't mention the cream I bought. She didn't mention that I was standing there in my work boots, looking like a zombie. While she played house, I was invisible. I was infrastructure. I was the plumbing necessary. But nobody wanted to see how I worked, and nobody thanked me unless I broke. But the real turning point, the moment the invisible ink became visible to me, happened 3 months ago. I was scrolling through the Scott family group chat, looking for a photo of my niece's birthday that Mom had sent. I was moving my thumb quickly, the messages blurring past, when I stopped on a message from Kendra to Mason that she must have accidentally sent to the main group instead of a private chat, or perhaps she just didn't care who saw it. It was from back in July. During the 4th of July barbecue planning, Mason had asked, "Who is going to bring the fireworks and the extra chairs?" "I don't want to rent a truck," Kendra had replied. "Tag Lily. Lily equals solution. Just tell her we need it by noon. Lily equals solution." She hadn't written "Ask Lily." She hadn't written "See if Lily can help." She had written it like a mathematical equation. I was not a person with agency. I was a variable in her equation to get what she wanted with zero effort on her part. I started paying attention after that. I noticed the way she tagged me in messages. It was never a question. It was always a directive disguised as a compliment. "You are so good at picking desserts." "Lily, you handle the pies. You're so organized." "Lily, you coordinate the time with Mom and Dad. You have that big car." "Lily, you pick up the folding tables." It was brilliant. Really. By framing it as praise, I was capable. I was organized. I was reliable. She made it impossible for me to refuse without looking like a jerk. If I said no, I wasn't just declining a task. I was contradicting her compliment. I was admitting that I wasn't capable or organized. It was a trap made of sugar and guilt. I sat in the break room at Rivergate one night, staring at a lukewarm cup of coffee, and I finally admitted the truth to myself. I did not hate Thanksgiving. I actually loved the idea of it. I loved the smell of sage and rosemary. I loved the crisp air. I loved the history of it. What I hated was the feeling of being a staff member at my own family events. I hated that my presence was only valued in proportion to what I brought or what I fixed. I was not a guest. I was the logistics manager for Kendra's fantasy life. She was the director, the star, and the publicist. I was the key grip, the caterer, and the best boy, running around in the dark to make sure her lighting was right. And the worst part was that they didn't even pay me. They paid me in criticism and backhanded comments about my life choices. So when the notification regarding the homemade-only rule popped up on my screen earlier this month, I didn't feel the usual panic or the urge to negotiate. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the schedule of my shifts. I looked at my bank account, which was perfectly healthy because I worked myself to the bone. I looked at the mirror and saw the dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I realized that Lily equals solution was a contract I had never signed. and like any at-will employee, I had the right to resign without notice. I wasn't going to fight them. I wasn't going to argue. I was just going to stop being the solution. I was going to let the problem be the problem. The wind howled outside my car as I drove toward the Friendsgiving, carrying my store-bought pie. I thought about Kendra's rule again. Only homemade. From the heart. It was a joke. There was no heart in her demands. It was all calculation. She wanted the aesthetic of a homemade meal without the soul that is supposed to go into it. She wanted the labor to be invisible so the photo could be effortless. Well, the labor was gone now, and I had a feeling that without her logistics manager, the production was about to fall apart. And for the first time in 35 years, I wasn't worried about fixing it. I was just curious to see how it would look on camera. The digital bombardment began on the second day of November. I was in the middle of a shift change, swapping out my contaminated scrubs for fresh ones after a particularly messy call involving a septic geriatric patient. When my phone vibrated against the metal bench of the locker room, it was not a work alert. It was a notification from WhatsApp, announcing that I had been added to a new group. The name of the group glared up at me, Scott Turkey Squad. It was followed by a turkey emoji. My mother had created the group, but as soon as I opened the chat, I saw that Kendra had already taken command of the vessel. The first message was a wall of text, formatted with the kind of manic cheerfulness that usually precedes an unreasonable demand. "Welcome to the official planning thread for Thanksgiving," Kendra had typed. "This year is going to be special. We are going for something elevated, sophisticated, traditional. I want us to make core memories, not just eat dinner." I sat down on the bench, one shoe off, and felt a headache beginning to throb behind my left eye. Elevated. That was Kendra's buzzword of the month. It usually meant expensive for me and photogenic for her. Then came the mandate, delivered in a separate message for emphasis. To keep the spirit of the holiday authentic, we are implementing a new rule. No store-bought food. Everything on the table must be homemade, from scratch, no shortcuts. We want the food to have soul. I stared at the word soul. I wondered if Kendra knew that my soul was currently located somewhere outside my body, hovering near the ceiling of an ambulance bay, desperate for a nap. I looked at my calendar app. I already knew what my schedule looked like, but I checked it again, hoping for a miracle that did not exist. My schedule was a block of red ink. I typed my reply carefully. I did not want to be the wet blanket, but I needed to be the voice of reason. "Hey everyone, that sounds nice, but please look at my roster. I am working 12-hour shifts on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I am also on the overnight rotation Wednesday into Thursday. I get off work at 7 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day." I hit send. Then I added a follow-up to be crystal clear. "It is not safe for me to cook a 20-pound bird when I've been awake for 24 hours. I am a fire hazard. Plus, a turkey needs hours of prep and basting. I physically cannot be there to do it." I waited. The 3 dots appeared, indicating Kendra was typing. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. "Lily, do not be negative," she finally wrote. "You always find problems. This is about effort." I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. Problems? I was describing physics and biology. A human being cannot baste a turkey while simultaneously performing CPR in a different zip code. I tried to offer a solution. This was the moment I tried to save us all. "I can order the turkey from Henderson's Smokehouse." I typed, "It is the best in town. It is free range, local, and they smoke it for 12 hours. It costs $140. But I will pay for the whole thing. It will be delicious and high quality." To me, this was a generous offer. Henderson's was legendary. Their waiting list for holiday birds usually filled up by October, but I knew the owner because I had treated his wife for a severe allergic reaction the year before, and he owed me a favor. I was willing to call in a marker and drop nearly $150 to ensure we had a good meal. The rejection was swift and absolute. "No," Kendra replied, "that is cheating. It is not about the money. Lily, it is about the love put into it. Store-bought food has no energy. If you buy it, it does not count." Then Mason, my brother-in-law, chimed in. I could picture him sitting on his couch, thumbing his phone while watching highlights of a game. "Come on, Lily. It is just one meal. It is not that hard." I wanted to scream. Just one meal. It was a logistical marathon, and for Mason, whose contribution to one meal was usually eating it and then falling asleep in the recliner, the audacity was breathtaking. Then my mother entered the chat. This was her signature move, the compliment sandwich with a filling of guilt. "Lily, honey, you are the best organizer we have. You always figure out how to make things work. I know you are busy, but this means so much to your sister. She has a vision. A vision." The word hung there. We were not planning a dinner. We were executing a vision. My father sent a message a moment later. "Just prep beforehand. Do it on the weekend. Freeze it if you have to." I rubbed my temples. Freeze a whole roasted turkey, or prep a raw bird 5 days in advance so it could sit in the fridge and cultivate salmonella. He was speaking from a place of total culinary ignorance. He was solving a mechanical problem, fix the car before the trip without understanding that food was organic and time-sensitive. I tried one more time. "Dad, I cannot roast a turkey on Sunday for Thursday. It will be dry and gross, and I cannot do it Wednesday night because I'm working." That was when Kendra dropped the hammer. It was the message that shifted the conversation from annoying to cruel. "You can figure it out. Lily, honestly, you have way more free time than the rest of us. You do not have kids. You do not have a household to run. You just have your job. I have to manage the twins and the house and the renovation planning. I am doing the hard work of hosting. You just have to cook." I stared at the screen, my mouth slightly open. I just had my job. My job where I held people's intestines inside their bodies. My job where I was responsible for the difference between life and death. My job where overtime wasn't a choice. It was a necessity because the healthcare system was crumbling, but because I didn't have 2 toddlers running around screaming. Kendra viewed my time as an empty vessel waiting to be filled with her requirements. To her, my 12 hours of trauma were less taxing than her 2 hours of folding laundry. Before I could respond, before I could type the string of expletives that were dancing on the tip of my tongue, Kendra sent an image. "Here is the assignment chart. I made it so we are all on the same page." I opened the image. It was beautiful. She had clearly designed it in some graphic design app. It had a lovely beige background, elegant script fonts, and little watercolor illustrations of pumpkins. I zoomed in to read the text. There were 2 columns. Name and responsibilities. Under Kendra, the list read, table setting, tablescape design, ambience music playlist, dessert pumpkin spice cupcakes, documentation photography, hostess duties. Under Lily, the list read, the turkey 20+ pounds, roasted, homemade gravy must use drippings, stuffing grandma's recipe, no box mix, mashed potatoes, 5 pounds, hand mashed, green bean casserole, fresh beans, no canned soup. Under Mom Dad, drinks ice, rolls, homemade yeast rolls. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound that startled a nurse walking past the open locker room door. The division of labor was comical. Kendra had assigned herself the fun stuff. Tablescape design, that meant buying flowers and putting them in a vase. Playlist, that meant hitting shuffle on Spotify. Cupcakes. She would probably make a box mix and put a fancy topper on it. But because she baked it, it would pass her own rule. And then there was documentation photography. She had literally assigned herself the job of taking pictures of the work I was supposed to do. She had formalized the exploitation. She was the art director. I was the construction crew. She was going to stand there in her coordinated outfit, holding her phone, telling me to smile while I sweat over a hot stove with a 20-pound carcass, having had 0 hours of sleep. And look at the food assignments. I had the turkey, the gravy, the stuffing, the potatoes, and the casserole. I had 90% of the actual meal. Mom and Dad had bread and drinks. Kendra had dessert. This was not a potluck. This was a catering contract. I looked at the message again. I am doing the hard work of hosting. Hosting, in Kendra's world, meant opening the door and accepting compliments. It meant curating the vibe. It did not mean feeding the people. Something inside me clicked into place. It was the sound of a latch closing, locking away the part of me that desperately wanted to please them. I had spent so long thinking that if I just explained my exhaustion clearly enough, they would understand. I thought it was a communication issue. But looking at that chart, with its pretty fonts and lopsided demands, I realized it wasn't a communication issue. It was a power issue. Kendra knew I was working. She knew I was tired. She didn't care. In fact, she liked it. By forcing me to cook the entire meal while I was exhausted, she was establishing dominance. She was proving that her vision was more important than my health. She was proving that her rule, homemade only, was absolute, and I was subject to it. If I bought the turkey, I challenged her authority. If I cooked the turkey, I submitted to her authority. There was no third option in her mind. I closed the image. I didn't type a response immediately. I let the silence stretch out in the group chat. I let them think I was scrambling, checking recipes, figuring out how to brine a bird in my bathtub between shifts. The nurse who had walked by poked her head back in. "Are you okay?" "Lily, you look like you're about to intubate someone." I looked up at her and smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I am fine," I said. "I just realized I have been reading the instructions wrong." I looked back at the phone. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to beg for permission to buy a turkey. I wasn't going to negotiate with terrorists who used watercolor pumpkins as weapons. I saw the dynamic for what it was. The Scott Turkey Squad wasn't a family gathering. It was a production set. Kendra was the director, and she had cast me as the prop master. But the thing about production sets is that if the crew walks off, the director is just a person standing in an empty room shouting at the walls. I put the phone away. I had patience to see. I had lives to save. And I had a decision to make. One that was going to require a level of cold detachment that I usually reserved for triage situations. They wanted a memorable Thanksgiving. They wanted something authentic. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I would follow the rules, but I would follow my rules, not the ones written on that beige digital flyer. The group chat pinged one more time. It was Kendra again. "Can you confirm you saw the chart?" "Lily, I need to know you are on board so I can finalize the color palette." I didn't reply. I stood up, tied my shoes, and walked out to the ambulance bay. The cool November air hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. I wasn't trapped. I was just done. It was 2 a.m. when I finally sent the text that would detonate the bridge I had been walking across for my entire adult life. I was sitting in my car in the driveway of my apartment complex. The engine was off, but the ticking sound of the cooling metal was the only company I had. My body felt like it was made of lead. The shift had been brutal. A relentless parade of respiratory distress calls and a nasty intoxicated driver incident that required us to use the jaws of life. My hands still smelled like latex and antiseptic soap, a scent that no amount of scrubbing ever seemed to fully remove. I stared at the Scott Turkey Squad group chat. The last message was still Kendra's colorful assignment chart, beaming with its toxic cheerfulness. I did not type quickly. My thumbs moved with the slow, deliberate heaviness of someone who had nothing left to lose. I needed to set a boundary, and for the first time, I needed that boundary to be made of concrete, not the porous suggestions I had offered in the past. I typed, "I cannot cook the turkey. I am exhausted and I have to work. I can bring a high-quality store-bought turkey from Henderson's. It will be better than anything I can make in this state. If that is not allowed under the new rules, then I will not be attending dinner this year." I read it over. It was not mean. It was not aggressive. It was a statement of fact followed by a logical consequence. It was the kind of communication I used at work, clear, concise, and leaving no room for misinterpretation. I hit send. I watched the screen. Almost immediately, the little double check marks turned blue. Kendra was awake. She had seen it. I waited for the explosion. I waited for the typing bubbles to appear, for the long paragraph about how I was ruining the vibe, but the bubbles did not appear. The status remained, "Seen." She was ignoring me. She was using silence as a weapon. Letting my message sit there in the digital void to make me feel small, to make me feel like I had shouted an obscenity in a church. Then, a notification popped up. It was from my mother. She had reacted to my message with a thumbs up emoji. That single, yellow pixelated thumb enraged me more than a paragraph of insults could have. In my mother's digital language, the thumbs up was not a sign of agreement. It was a dismissal. It was the equivalent of a door slamming in your face. It meant, I have heard you. I am displeased. And I am ending this conversation because you are being ridiculous. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and went inside. 10 minutes later, as I was standing in my kitchen drinking a glass of water, the phone rang. It was Mom. I answered it on the second ring, my voice flat. Hello? Why are you being so difficult? Lily. Her voice was tight, the tone she used when a cashier would not accept an expired coupon. It was a mixture of confusion and offense, as if my behavior was a personal attack on her equilibrium. I am not being difficult. Mom, I said, leaning against the counter and closing my eyes. I am being realistic. I cannot roast a turkey. I offered a solution. You guys rejected it, but Kendra has been preparing for this for a week. She said, she has been looking at recipes. She bought special twine. She has a whole theme. Lily. She has been working so hard. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The crack in the plaster above the refrigerator looked like a lightning bolt. She has been preparing the rules. Mom, I said, she has not been preparing the turkey. Buying twine is not labor. Cooking for 6 hours after working for 36 hours is labor. You are exaggerating. Mom snapped. You always make your job sound so dramatic. It is just cooking. It is what families do. You do it for the people you love. And what do the people I love do for me? I asked, do they let me sleep? Do they accept a $100 turkey from a professional smokehouse? Or do they force me to perform manual labor so Kendra can take a picture? There was a pause on the line. It was not the silence of contemplation. It was the silence of someone reloading their weapon. Then my father's voice boomed in the background, and a second later, he was on the phone. Mom must have put me on speaker. Lily, this is enough, he said. His voice was rough, carrying that edge of command he used when he felt his authority slipping. You are making your mother upset. You are making Kendra cry. I am not making anyone do anything. I said, I am stating my availability. What will people think Dad asked? The question hung in the air, heavy and reeking of insecurity. What people I asked? Genuinely confused. It is just us. Who are these people you are worried about? The extended family. Dad said. The neighbors. Kendra posts these things online. The cousins see it. If you show up with a plastic bag from a store, or if you do not show up at all, it looks like this family is broken. It looks like we did not raise you right. It looks cheap. I let out a short, incredulous breath. So this is not about the food. I said, it is not even about the tradition. It is about how we look to strangers on the internet and Cousin Deborah in Idaho. You are worried that if I do not cook a turkey, you will lose social capital. Don't be smart with me, Dad warned. We are asking you to do one thing, after everything we have done for you. I gripped the phone tighter. The fatigue was making my emotional barriers thin, and the resentment was leaking through. Everything you have done for me, I repeated. Dad, last month I left work early to drive you to your physical therapy because you refused to take a taxi. I paid for your new glasses because you did not want to dip into your savings. I spent 3 weekends in a row fixing the garage door because you were too proud to hire a repairman. I waited for him to acknowledge this. I waited for him to say, yes, you help us a lot, but he said nothing. The silence on the other end was deafening. It was the sound of selective memory. They absorbed my labor so effortlessly that they forgot it even happened. To them, my help was not a gift. It was a utility, like running water. You do not thank the faucet for working. You only curse it when it runs dry. Mom came back on the line, her voice softer now, trying the manipulative angle. We just want everyone together. Lily, we want a nice, homemade meal. Is that so much to ask? Why do you have to ruin it with all these conditions? I am not ruining it, I said, my voice steady. I am telling you what I can give. I can give you my company, and I can give you a store-bought bird. If that is not enough, then I am not the one ruining Thanksgiving. You are. I waited a beat, then delivered the final verdict. No one is being abandoned. Mom, I am willing to show up. I am willing to eat. But if the turkey is the price of admission, then I cannot pay it. Someone else has to fill that void. Maybe Kendra can cook it. She has the twine. After all, I hung up before she could respond. I stood in the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. It felt terrifying. I had never hung up on my parents before. I had never drawn a line that I didn't immediately erase with an apology. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it, expecting a furious text from my father, but it was a direct message from Kendra. It was not in the group chat. It was a private message, meant only for my eyes. Lily, stop being a brat, she wrote. If you don't do the turkey, I don't have the hero shot for the reel. The whole video builds up to the reveal of the bird on the table. If it is store-bought, it looks fake. I already promised a brand I would feature their serving platter with a homemade turkey. You are messing with my engagement. I stared at the words, the hero shot. The term was from photography and film. It meant the money shot, the most important image of the product. I felt a cold chill wash over me that had nothing to do with the drafty apartment. All the talk about tradition, about soul, about family values, about homemade love, it was all a lie. It was a caption. She needed a 20-pound, golden brown roasted turkey because she had a sponsorship deal, or at least the hope of one, involving a serving platter. She needed the aesthetic of domestic labor without doing the labor herself. She needed me to be the stunt double who jumped through the fire so she could look cool walking away from the explosion. She didn't care if I was tired. She didn't care if I fell asleep at the wheel driving over there. She cared about the hero shot. I felt the last tether snap, that invisible cord of obligation that connects a child to their family, the one that pulls you back no matter how far you run. Just broke. It didn't fray. It was cut with a pair of scissors made of pure narcissism. I typed a reply to Kendra. Good luck with your engagement. Then I blocked her number. I didn't block her forever. I knew I couldn't do that yet, but I blocked her for tonight. I blocked her for tomorrow. I needed silence. I walked over to the calendar on my fridge and looked at Thursday, Thanksgiving. I picked up a marker and crossed out, family dinner, 4 p.m. Then I pulled up my messages and found the thread with Sarah, my shift partner. She had been begging me to come to her orphan Friendsgiving for years. It was a gathering of paramedics, nurses, and dispatchers who were either working the holiday or had been ostracized by their families. I typed, "Is the invite still open?" Sarah replied instantly, "Always. But be warned, the only rule is that you cannot bring anything that requires effort. If I see you chopping a vegetable, I will kick you out. We are ordering pizza and someone is bringing a bucket of KFC." I laughed. It was a real laugh this time, not the dry bark I had let out earlier. "I'm in." I typed, "I will bring a pie, a store-bought pie, with the price tag still on it." Sarah sent back a heart emoji, a real heart, not a decorative leaf, not a turkey, just a heart. I went into my bedroom and collapsed onto the bed without even taking off my uniform. For the first time in years, I wasn't falling asleep making a mental checklist of groceries to buy or side dishes to prep. I wasn't worrying about whether the gravy would be lumpy or if Dad would criticize the stuffing. I was just going to sleep. The Scott Turkey Squad could find another prop. The hero of this story was going to be unconscious for the next 8 hours. And when she woke up, she was going to eat pizza. The transition from the cold, wind-bitten parking lot to the interior of Sarah's loft was like stepping from a walk-in freezer into a sauna. The moment I opened the heavy industrial door, I was hit by a wall of warmth, noise, and the distinct, unpretentious smell of grease, cheese, and cheap red wine. It was not the smell of sage and roasting poultry that permeated every other house in America on this night. It was the smell of rebellion. The loft was crowded. Sarah had pushed her furniture against the walls to make room for a long folding table covered in a mismatch of tablecloths. Around the room stood about 15 people, all of whom I recognized from the trenches. There were EMTs still wearing their navy blue duty pants, but with the uniform shirts replaced by hoodies. There were ER nurses who looked like they had slept for 14 hours straight and were finally waking up. There was a dispatcher named Mike, who was usually a voice in my earpiece, now holding a slice of pepperoni pizza and laughing so hard his face was red. I walked in, clutching my plastic bag with the supermarket pie and the potato salad, and felt a wave of relief so physical it almost made my knees buckle. Here, nobody cared about my posture. Nobody cared about the brand of my shoes. Nobody was going to ask me why I was not married yet, or when I planned to provide grandchildren. Sarah spotted me from across the room. She was holding a bucket of fried chicken in one hand and a bottle of hot sauce in the other. "Lily," she shouted, waving the hot sauce like a scepter. "You made it? Did you bring the contraband?" I lifted the bag. "Store-bought pie," I announced, trying to be heard over the music, with the price tag still on it. A cheer went up from the group nearest the door. It was ridiculous, really, celebrating a $12 pie like it was a trophy, but that was the energy of the room. We were celebrating mediocrity because mediocrity was permitted here. Excellence was for the job. Perfection was for saving lives. Dinner was allowed to be just okay. I found a spot on a worn-out velvet sofa between a respiratory therapist named Dave and a triage nurse named Elena. Dave handed me a paper plate loaded with pizza, a biscuit, and a scoop of coleslaw that looked suspiciously neon green. "Eat," Dave said. Before the wolves get it, I took a bite of the pizza. It was cold. It was chewy. It was fantastic. Just as I was about to ask Elena about her shift, Sarah banged a spoon against a wine bottle. The room quieted down, though not completely. "Rule check," Sarah yelled. "What is the one rule?" A chorus of voices shouted back in unison. "No work talk for 30 minutes. I smiled. It was the only rule that mattered. Usually, when first responders get together, the conversation inevitably drifts toward the trauma we have seen. We swap war stories about severed limbs and cardiac arrests like trading cards. It is how we cope. But it also means we never really leave the ambulance. But tonight, Sarah was enforcing a demilitarized zone. For 30 minutes, we had to be normal people. I leaned back into the sofa, letting the noise of the party wash over me. For the first time all week, my shoulders dropped away from my ears. I took another bite of pizza and actually tasted the pepperoni. I was safe. I was hidden. Then, my pocket buzzed. It was a long, angry vibration against my hip. I ignored it. It stopped, then started again immediately. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I took a sip of the wine someone had poured into a plastic cup. I told myself to leave it. I told myself that whatever was happening in the Scott family group chat was not an emergency. Unless someone was bleeding out or in cardiac arrest, it could wait. And if they were in cardiac arrest, they should call 911. Not me. But the buzzing did not stop. It was relentless. It felt like a frantic tapping on my shoulder, demanding attention. I sighed, setting my plate down on the coffee table. "Everything okay?" Elena asked, glancing at my pocket. "Just my family realizing that actions have consequences." I said, "I will be right back." I stood up and walked toward the bathroom, the only place in the loft with a lock on the door. I stepped inside, turned the lock, and the sounds of the party muffled slightly. I leaned against the sink and pulled the phone out of my pocket. The screen was a cascade of notifications. It looked like a slot machine that had hit the jackpot of dysfunction. I unlocked the phone and opened the group chat. The timestamps told the story of a slow-motion train wreck. 8:07 p.m. Dad. "Where's the turkey? The oven is hot. Everyone is waiting." 8:10 p.m. Mom. "Lily, please tell me you are parking the car. The twins are hungry." 8:15 p.m. Kendra. "This isn't funny. Lily, we are all sitting here. The table is set." 8:20 p.m. Mason. "The kids are literally crying. Hope you are happy." 8:22 p.m. Dad, pick up the phone. 8:25 p.m. Kendra. You are ruining the whole night. This is so selfish. Even for you. 8:30 p.m. Mom, we don't have a main course. Lily, we just have sides. I scrolled through the wall of text, my heart rate spiking despite my best efforts to stay calm. The guilt was automatic, a reflex installed in my operating system since childhood. Reading that the kids were crying made my stomach twist. But then I paused. Were the twins really crying because there was no turkey? They were 3 years old. They would be perfectly happy eating rolls and mashed potatoes. They were likely crying because the tension in the room was radioactive, or because Kendra was stressed, not because they missed out on a slice of dry breast meat. Then I saw a message from Mason that made my blood run cold. 8:35 p.m. Mason, you could have at least warned us. You just didn't show up. That is psycho behavior. I stared at the screen. Warned them. I felt a flash of pure, white-hot anger. I did not just warn them. I had broadcast my intentions with the clarity of an emergency siren. I had told them my schedule. I had told them I was tired. I had told them I would bring a store-bought bird or nothing at all. They had chosen to interpret my boundary as a negotiation tactic. I did not reply to Mason. Instead, I did something that felt incredibly petty and incredibly necessary. I scrolled up. I scrolled back 3 weeks to the very first time I said no. I took a screenshot. I scrolled to the conversation where I offered the smokehouse turkey. Screenshot. I scrolled to the text from last night where I explicitly said, "If that is not allowed, I will not be attending." Screenshot. I had the receipts. I was not crazy. I was not psycho. I was simply a person who had said something they did not want to hear. So they pretended I hadn't said it. I posted the 3 screenshots into the group chat. Then I typed one sentence. I am not crazy. I told you. Read the dates. I watched the read receipts appear instantly. Everyone was on their phones. The dinner must be absolutely miserable. My phone rang in my hand. It was my father. I took a deep breath. Staring at his name, I could ignore it. I could go back out to the party and eat cold pizza and laugh with Dave. But I knew that if I didn't answer, this would fester. It would become a myth. The legend of the year. Lily abandoned the family. I needed to puncture the myth before it hardened into fact. I slid the icon to answer. Hello, Dad? Where the hell are you? His voice was so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. He was not just angry. He was unleashing years of accumulated frustration on the most convenient target. I am at dinner, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. With friends. We are waiting for you, he shouted. The oven has been on at 350 degrees for 2 hours. We have nothing to put in it. Your mother is in the kitchen crying her eyes out. I felt a pang of sympathy for my mother. But it was fleeting. She had seen the messages too. She had sent the thumbs-up emoji dismissing me. Dad, I said, I told you yesterday. I told you 3 weeks ago. I cannot cook the turkey. Why is the oven on? Why did nobody buy a turkey? Because we thought you would do it, he yelled. The words hung in the air between us, suspended over the miles of telephone wire. We thought you would do it. There it was, the naked truth. It wasn't that they didn't hear me. It wasn't that my texts failed to deliver. It was that they simply did not believe that I had the capacity to defy them. They banked on my submission. Or order Chinese food. But do not yell at me because you gambled on my lack of self-respect and lost. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the quiet part out loud. I had severed the line. I had refused to accept the script they handed me. I looked at the phone again. The group chat was silent now. The screenshots I posted sat there like unexploded bombs. They couldn't argue with the timestamps. Mason couldn't say I didn't warn them when the warning was right there in black and white from November 4th. I was about to put the phone away and return to the party when a new notification popped up. It was not from the immediate family group. It was from a cousin. Sarah, not the Sarah hosting the party, who lived 2 towns over. She wasn't at the dinner, but she followed Kendra on Instagram. Hey, Lily. The text read, I thought you said there was drama and no food. I frowned. There is. I typed back, I am not there. There is no turkey. Then why is Kendra posting this? Cousin Sarah replied. She sent a screen recording of Kendra's Instagram story. Posted 3 minutes ago. I clicked play. The video opened with a filter that made everything look golden and soft. Acoustic guitar music played in the background. The camera panned over the table, showing the candles, the name cards, the homemade centerpiece. Then it panned to Kendra's face. She looked glowing, happy, completely unbothered, so blessed to be surrounded by family. She whispered to the camera, "The house smells amazing. Everything is made from scratch. Just waiting on the bird to come out of the oven. Homemade tradition, Scott family. Thanksgiving." I watched it 3 times. The house did not smell amazing. The house probably smelled like tension and my father's cologne. There was no bird in the oven. The oven was empty. She was lying. She wasn't just lying. She was actively rewriting reality in real time. She was broadcasting a perfect holiday to her 5,000 followers while her actual family sat in a turkeyless purgatory, screaming at each other. I realized then that Kendra didn't care that I wasn't there. She didn't care that there was no food. She only cared that the audience didn't know. She was constructing a stage play where the audience saw a feast, but the actors were starving. A strange sensation washed over me. It was not anger anymore. It was fascination. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. She was so committed to the bit that she was posting about a turkey that did not exist. I texted Cousin Sarah back. "There is no bird. She is filming an empty oven." Cousin Sarah replied with a skull emoji. "OMG, that is unhinged. Are you going to call her out?" I looked at the reply button on Kendra's story. I could do it. I could reply publicly. I could post a photo of my pizza and tag her. I could burn it all down right now. But I looked at the bathroom door. Beyond it, people were laughing. Dave was probably saving me another slice of pizza. I could hear the song "Don't Stop Believin' playing on the speaker. I didn't want to be in Kendra's movie anymore. Not as a prop, not as a villain, not even as a critic. I closed the app. I didn't call her out. I didn't comment. I let her have her lie. Because soon enough, the guests at that table were going to get hungry, and you cannot eat an Instagram story. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the party. "Is everything okay?" Sarah, the host, asked, handing me a fresh glass of wine. I took the glass and clinked it against hers. "Everything is perfect," I said. "My sister is currently serving a virtual turkey to her followers, and my dad is realizing that ovens don't generate poultry spontaneously." Sarah laughed. "Sounds like their problem." "It is," I said, taking a sip of the cheap, sweet wine. "It finally is." I sat back down on the sofa and reached for a slice of garlic bread. For the first time in 35 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be on Thanksgiving. And the best part was, I didn't have to wash a single dish. The morning after Thanksgiving, the hangover I felt had nothing to do with the cheap wine I had consumed at Sarah's loft. It was an emotional hangover, the kind that leaves you feeling raw and exposed. I woke up at 10 o'clock, a luxury I hadn't experienced in months, and reached for my phone. The silence from the immediate family group chat was deafening. There were no good morning texts, no photos of leftover turkey sandwiches, no messages about Black Friday shopping. It was a digital ghost town. But the social media front was fully active. My notifications were cluttered with tags and comments. I opened Facebook first. At 8 in the morning, Kendra had posted a long, rambling status update. It didn't name me directly, that would be too aggressive for her brand, but it was a masterclass in passive-aggressive storytelling. "It breaks my heart when career ambitions are placed above the core memories of children," she wrote. "We try so hard to build traditions, but sometimes people just don't share the same values of family and sacrifice." The boys were disappointed, but we made the best of it with love and gratitude. Family first priorities, heartbroken. Below the post, my mother had commented with a single tragic, sad face emoji. I scrolled through the comments. They were a chorus of sympathy from her followers and distant relatives. "So sorry to hear that. Kendra, some people just don't get it. You are such a good mom for trying." She was spinning the narrative, in her version of events. I was the cold-hearted career woman who had promised to show up and then ruthlessly abandoned her starving nephews to chase a paycheck. She had erased the weeks of warnings. She had erased her own rigidity. She had erased the empty oven. I was about to close the app in disgust when my phone rang. It was Aunt Marla. Marla was my father's sister. She was a no-nonsense woman who had run a bakery for 30 years and had zero patience for fluff. She rarely called unless someone had died or she had a question about a medical symptom. I answered warily. "Morning, Aunt Marla." "Cut the crap." "Lily," she said, her voice gravelly from decades of smoking. "I just saw Kendra's post, and I saw your mom's dramatic emoji. Now, I know you. You are many things stubborn, work-obsessed, maybe a little too serious, but you are not a flake." She paused, and I could hear the flick of a lighter. "Something smells fishy." She continued. "And it ain't the turkey. Tell me the truth. What happened?" I sat up in bed, pulling the duvet around me. Kendra wanted a homemade-only Thanksgiving. I explained. I told her 3 weeks ago I was working 3 12-hour shifts in a row. I told her I couldn't cook a turkey safely. I offered to buy one from Henderson's. She said no. Dad said no. They said if I bought it, it didn't count. So I told them I wouldn't come if I couldn't bring store-bought food. And Marla prompted, "And they didn't believe me." I said, "They waited until 8 o'clock last night to ask where the turkey was." Marla let out a low whistle. "So the oven was empty?" "Empty." I confirmed. "Wait," Marla said. "Kendra posted a photo of a roasted turkey on her story last night. I saw it. It looked perfect. That was a lie." I said, "Or a stock photo. Or she ordered takeout after the fact and plated it. But at 8 o'clock, there was no bird." "I need proof," Marla said. "Not because I don't believe you, but because the family chat on my side is blowing up. Your cousin Beth is saying you had a mental breakdown." I didn't hesitate. I opened my gallery and found the screenshots I had taken the night before. The ones showing the dates, the ones showing my clear refusal, the ones showing Kendra's Lily equals solution chart. "I'm sending them to you now," I said. I forwarded the images to Marla. There was a moment of silence on the line as she reviewed them. "Holy cow," she muttered. "Lily equals solution. What is she?" "A corporate manager. And November 4th. You told them on November 4th. "Yes," I said. "And you offered Henderson's." Marla asked, sounding personally offended. "Henderson's is better than anything your mother has ever cooked in her life. That woman dries out chicken until it's basically jerky." Marla laughed, a dry, cackling sound. "Okay, I got what I need. You sit tight, kid. The truth has a way of getting out when Marla is on the case." She hung up. Within an hour, the tide began to turn. Marla didn't just keep the information to herself, she weaponized it. I didn't see exactly what she did, but I started getting texts from relatives who had previously been silent or critical. Cousin Beth, the one who thought I had a breakdown, messaged, "Hey Lily, just saw the texts Marla shared. I had no idea you told them weeks ago." That is messed up. Sorry for assuming. An uncle texted Henderson's is top tier. Turning that down is a crime. Don't worry about the noise. Even a neighbor of my parents, Mrs. Higgins, who had commented "praying for you" on Kendra's post, deleted her comment. The narrative was cracking. The receipts were out. Around noon, my father called again. I let it ring twice before answering. I was done being afraid of him. "Hello, Dad." He didn't yell this time. His voice sounded smaller, deflated. It was the voice of a man who had been embarrassed publicly. "Marla called me," he said. "She gave me an earful. I'm sure she did." I said, "She shouldn't be involved in our private business." "Lily," he said, trying to regain some ground, "you shouldn't be sending screenshots to people. It makes the family look divided. The family is divided." "Dad," I said, "you divided it when you decided my time was worth less than Kendra's aesthetic." He sighed. A long, heavy exhale. "Your mother is really upset. She barely slept. She feels foolish. She should." I said, "I didn't say it with malice, just with fact." "Look," Dad said, "we just want to move past this. Kendra is willing to drop it if you just smooth things over. Just apologize for the way it happened, not for the turkey, but for the confusion, for not making sure we understood. I gripped the phone. Even now, in the face of absolute evidence, they wanted me to bend. They wanted me to take 10% of the blame so they didn't have to carry 100% of it. They wanted peace, but their version of peace required my submission. No, Dad, I said, what I am not apologizing for the confusion. I said firmly, I was clear. The confusion was a choice you made. You chose to ignore me. I will not apologize for having boundaries. You are being very stubborn, he said. I am being an adult, I corrected, and until you can respect that, I am going to be busy. I hung up again. It was easier the second time. But the real blow came later that afternoon. I received a message on Instagram from a woman named Jessica. I recognized her vaguely. She was one of Kendra's mom friends, a woman who often appeared in the background of Kendra's curated brunch photos. Hey Lily, Jessica wrote. I know we don't really know each other, but this whole thing is blowing up and I feel like I need to tell you something. I was at Kendra's house for coffee 2 weeks ago. She was talking about the Thanksgiving plan. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. What did she say? I typed back. Jessica's reply came in bubbling dots that seemed to take forever to resolve into text. She was complaining that you were trying to buy a turkey. She said she was going to force you to cook it, and then she laughed and said, honestly, if Lily flakes, it's even better content. The stressed hostess saved the day angle gets way more engagement than a perfect dinner. Either I get a turkey or I get a victim story. Win-win. I read the message 3 times. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just that she didn't respect my time. It was that she had calculated the failure. She had gamified my potential burnout. She had looked at the scenario where her sister, her own flesh and blood, was pushed to the breaking point, and she had seen it as a marketing opportunity. Either I get a turkey or I get a victim story. She had set me up. If I showed up exhausted and cooked, she got her prop. If I didn't show up, she got her tragedy. She had monetized our relationship. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that I knew would never fully thaw. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was a fundamental betrayal of trust. I took a screenshot of Jessica's message. I didn't send it to Marla. I didn't send it to the group chat. I saved it in a folder on my phone labeled Evidence. I realized then that I couldn't go back to how things were. I couldn't be the fixer. I couldn't be the solution. Because to Kendra, I wasn't a person. I was content. I spent the rest of the day cleaning my apartment. I scrubbed the floors. I organized my closet. I did laundry. It was physical labor. But it was my labor. For my home. I didn't block my family permanently. That would be too dramatic. And it would give Kendra more ammunition for her estranged sister narrative. Instead, I initiated a new protocol. I turned off notifications for the family group chat. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb for their specific numbers during my sleeping hours. I decided that from now on, every request would be met with a pause. No immediate, yes, no jumping in the car. I was rebuilding the relationship, but I was building it with walls. They could come visit, but they couldn't just walk in and take what they wanted anymore. The ATM was closed. The IT support desk was shuttered. The turkey delivery service was permanently out of business. That evening, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and the leftover store-bought pie. It was quiet. My phone was silent. I took a bite of the pie. It tasted sweet, artificial, and absolutely liberated. I drove to my parents' house 2 days after the holiday, not to apologize, but to return a casserole dish I had borrowed weeks ago and to face the music in person. I knew that text messages and screenshots were powerful, but they lacked the finality of eye contact. I wanted them to look at me, the real me, not the convenient version they had constructed in their heads, and see that the dynamic had permanently shifted. When I walked through the front door, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. The house was aggressively quiet. My father was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in the garage to avoid the emotional shrapnel. My mother was in the kitchen, aggressively wiping down a counter that was already clean. And sitting at the dining room table, positioned exactly so she would be the first thing anyone saw upon entering, was Kendra. She did not look like the glowing domestic goddess she played on the internet. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her arms crossed over her chest like a barrier tape. Mason was sitting next to her, scrolling on his tablet, looking like a man who wished he could dissolve into the upholstery. I walked in and placed the glass casserole dish on the sidebar. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was calm. I had practiced this calmness on the drive over. Kendra did not say hello. She just stared at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and furious. "You humiliated me," she said. Her voice was low, trembling with a mixture of rage and self-pity. "You humiliated this whole family." I turned to face her fully. I did not take off my coat. I wanted them to know I was not staying. "No, Kendra," I said, "I did not humiliate you. You humiliated yourself because you created a law without a logistics plan. You set a trap, and when I refused to walk into it, you got caught in it yourself." She stood up then, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You do not get to lecture me about logistics," she snapped. "I had a plan. My plan was for us to work together as a family. But you decided to be selfish. You decided that your job and your sleep were more important than your nephew's having a memory. There it was again. The children. The ultimate shield. I am going to stop you right there," I said, raising a hand. "Do not use the twins as a weapon. They are 3 years old. They do not care if the turkey was roasted by their aunt or by a professional at a smokehouse. They care that their mother was screaming at a phone screen instead of playing with them." "You do not understand," Kendra hissed, tears springing to her eyes. "You do not understand because you do not have children. You do not know the pressure to make things magical. You live your little selfish life in your apartment with no one to answer to. You have no idea what it takes to build a home." It was the oldest card in her deck, the "You are not a mother" card. It was designed to shut me down, to invalidate my feelings because I had not given birth. Usually, I would retreat when she played this. I would feel the sting of inadequacy and back off, but not today. I stepped closer to the table. "I do not need to have children to understand respect," I said, my voice hardening, "and I do not need to be a mother to understand the word no. That is the part you are missing. Kendra, you think that because you have kids, your desires are commands. You think my time is less valuable because I'm not raising humans. But my time saves humans. And even if it didn't, even if I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for 12 hours, my no is still a complete sentence." Mason looked up from his tablet. Sensing that his wife was losing ground, he decided to jump in, playing the role of the reasonable peacemaker who was actually just an enabler in a polo shirt. "Lily, come on," he said, giving me a tight, condescending smile. "We get it. You were tired. But honestly, you could have pushed through. It is 1 day a year. You could have tried a little harder. Everyone is tired. Lily, I work 40 hours a week too. We just make it happen." I looked at Mason. I looked at his soft hands and his unlined face. "Mason," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "Last week, I did chest compressions on a 250-pound man for 45 minutes while moving in the back of a vehicle going 70 miles per hour. My body physically aches in ways you cannot imagine. Telling me to push through is not encouragement. It is a demand for me to damage myself for your convenience. Trying harder is how people burn out. And I am done burning myself to keep you too warm." Mason blinked, his smile faltering. He looked down at the table, retreating back into his silence. Kendra, however, was not done. She was pacing now, a frantic energy radiating off her. "It is not just about the food," she shouted. "It is about the image. It is about showing that we value tradition. You ruined the aesthetic. Lily, you made us look cheap." I watched her pace. I watched the way her eyes darted to her laptop, which was open on the table amidst a scatter of papers and planners. I asked the question that had been haunting me since I saw her Instagram story. "Kendra, do you need a turkey, or do you need a photo of a turkey?" She froze. She stopped mid-stride and looked at me. For a split second, the mask slipped. The grieving mother act dropped, and I saw the panic of a content creator who had missed a deadline. "What kind of question is that?" she sputtered. But her voice lacked the conviction it had a moment ago. "It is a simple question," I said. "If you needed food, you would have let me buy the smoked turkey. It was delicious. It was expensive. It was ready. But you said no. You said it had to be homemade. Why? Why was the method more important than the meal? Because it means more," she screamed. "Does it?" I asked. "Or does it just tag better?" I walked over to the table where her laptop was sitting. The screen was not dark. It was awake, displaying her email inbox. I had not intended to snoop, but the font was large, and the subject line of the open email was staring right at me. It read, "RE Deliverables, Homemade Only Thanksgiving Challenge." I felt the air leave the room. I looked closer. It was an email from a brand. I recognized the logo. It was a company that sold high-end cookware and serving platters. I read the preview text. "Hi, Kendra. Just following up on the content for the campaign. Remember, the contract stipulates that the turkey must be prepared in the Roastmaster pan, and we need shots of the preparation process to verify the homemade angle for the challenge grant. Please upload the raw footage by Friday." Everything fell into place. The rigidity, the panic, the Scott Turkey Squad, the refusal of the store-bought bird. It wasn't a family tradition. It was a gig. I looked up at Kendra. She was pale. She knew I had seen it. "So," I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was a challenge, a sponsored challenge. I reached out and spun the laptop around so Mom, who had just walked in from the kitchen with a tray of coffee, could see it. Mom stopped. She looked at the screen, squinting to read the text. "What is this?" Mom asked. "It is a sponsorship," I said, never taking my eyes off Kendra. Kendra signed a contract to participate in a homemade-only marketing campaign. She needed to film the turkey being made from scratch to get paid, or to get free pans, or whatever they promised her. Kendra lunged for the laptop, slamming it shut. "That is private," she shrieked. "You are invading my privacy. You have no right to read my emails. And you have no right to use my labor to fulfill your business contracts," I yelled back, my voice finally rising to match hers. The room went silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. "You weren't asking for help," I said, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You were outsourcing your job. You signed a deal that required hours of cooking, and instead of doing it, you assigned it to me. You lied to us. You told us it was about soul. You told us it was about Grandma's tradition, but it was just about meeting the deliverables for a pan company." Kendra was shaking. She looked cornered, trapped between her lies and the reality I had just exposed. "It is for the family," she cried, her voice cracking. "The money from these brand deals helps us. It pays for the kids' extras. I am trying to build a business here, and you are sabotaging it. I couldn't do the cooking and the filming and the editing. I needed help. I thought you would want to help me succeed. You didn't ask for help," I said, cold as ice. "You gave orders, and you didn't offer to cut me in on the check. You treated me like a prop. You treated me like the kitchen staff so you could be the star." Mom set the coffee tray down. The cups rattled. She looked at Kendra with a devastating expression. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Deep, heavy disappointment. "You lied to me too," Mom said softly. "You told me you wanted to get back to basics. You told me you wanted the boys to smell the cooking like you did when you were little." It is the same thing Kendra insisted. Though she sounded desperate now. "It is authentic content." "No," I said, "it is fake, and you tried to make me the mechanic of your fake life." I buttoned my coat. I felt a strange sense of lightness. The mystery was solved. I wasn't a bad sister. I was just a non-compliant employee. I walked to the door, passing Mason, who was staring at the floor, unable to look anyone in the eye. He knew. Of course he knew. He was part of the production crew too. "Lily." "Wait," Mom said, taking a step toward me. "No, Mom," I said. "I am done waiting." I turned back to Kendra one last time. She was clutching her closed laptop to her chest like a shield. Here is the new rule. Kendra, I said. My voice was steady, void of any emotion other than absolute certainty. From now on, your rules are your burden. If you want a homemade Thanksgiving, you cook it. If you want a perfect party, you plan it. If you sign a contract, you fulfill it. I opened the door, letting the cold November air rush into the stifling heat of the house. I am not your solution anymore, I said, and I am definitely not your background extra. If you want to build a brand, go ahead. But do not ever try to build it on my back again. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it firmly, with a click that sounded like a judge's gavel ending a trial. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back at the window. I didn't care if she was filming me. I was rewriting my own script now, and in this version, I was the one driving away. The weeks following the Thanksgiving confrontation were defined by a silence that felt heavy and physical, like a thick wool blanket draped over my life. In the past, silence from my family would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. I would have been checking my phone every 5 minutes, wondering if they were angry, wondering if they needed me, wondering how I could fix it. But this time, the silence was not a punishment they were inflicting on me. It was a fortress I had built for myself. I implemented a strategy that therapists call low contact. It was not a total severance of ties, but a drastic reduction in the bandwidth I allocated to them. I stopped answering text messages the moment they arrived. If my mother texted me at 10 in the morning asking a non-urgent question about a recipe or a family gossip item, I did not reply until 6 in the evening. If Kendra sent a meme or a passive-aggressive quote about family unity, I did not reply at all. I treated my personal phone like my work pager. If there was no blood, no fire, and no cardiac arrest, it was not an emergency. The first real test of this new system came in early December, when the specter of Christmas began to loom. Usually, the first week of December was when the Scott family logistics engine, which was just a fancy name for me, kicked into high gear. I would be organizing the gift exchange, planning the menu, and coordinating the schedule to accommodate Kendra's in-laws and my parents' preferences. This year, I did nothing. My mother broke the standoff on the 10th of December. She called me on a Tuesday night. I let it go to voicemail, then called her back the next day during my lunch break. "Hello, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "You are hard to reach these days," she said, her tone a mix of accusation and hurt. "I am busy," I replied. "What is up?" "We need to talk about Christmas," she said. "I haven't seen a spreadsheet yet. Kendra is asking what time we are starting so she can plan the boys' nap times. And your father wants to know if you are picking up the prime rib roast from the butcher like usual." I took a bite of my sandwich. It was a turkey club from the hospital cafeteria, and I ate it with a calmness that surprised me. "I am not doing a spreadsheet this year." "Mom," I said, "and I am not picking up the roast." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Who is going to organize it?" "I assume the people hosting it will organize it," I said. "That would be you and Dad, or Kendra, if she wants to take over." "But we always count on you," she said, her voice rising. "You know I get overwhelmed with the timing." "I know," I said. "That is why you should keep it simple." I took a deep breath and laid out the terms I had rehearsed in my head for days. "Here is the plan. Mom, I am working Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. I will get off shift at noon. I will go home, shower, and sleep for a few hours. I will come to your house at 4 in the afternoon. I will stay for 2 hours. I will leave at 6. 2 hours?" she gasped. "Lily, that is ridiculous. It is Christmas. You spend the whole day. Not this year." I said, "I am tired. And regarding the food, I will not be cooking. I will not be picking up raw meat. I will bring a box of cookies from the bakery on 4th Street. That is my contribution." "Cookies," she repeated, as if I had offered to bring a bag of gravel. "Store-bought cookies." "Yes," I said. "They are delicious. If you need a prime rib, I suggest you call the butcher today and put it in Dad's name. He can drive. His hands are weak, but his feet work fine." I did not let her argue. I told her I had to get back to patients, which was true. and I hung up. The fallout was immediate. But because I had distanced myself, it felt like watching a storm from behind a thick pane of glass. My father was the next to react. He didn't call me, likely because he knew he would lose a shouting match. Instead, he acted out. 2 days later, I got a notification from our shared family data plan, the one I had been managing and paying the overage charges on for 5 years. Dad had gone to the store and tried to upgrade his phone. Assuming I would just authorize the extra $40 a month, the sales clerk called me because my name was the primary administrative contact. Ms. Scott, the clerk said, "Your father is here. He wants the new model with the max storage. It will increase the monthly bill by $45. He said you would approve it." I sat in my car in the ambulance bay. I could picture my father standing there, leaning on the counter, expecting the world to bend to his will because he had raised a daughter who always said yes. "Put him on the phone, please," I said. A moment later, Dad's gruff voice came on the line. "Just tell him it is okay." "Lily, my battery is dying on the old one." "Dad," I said, "I am not paying for a new phone. If you want the upgrade, you need to open your own account and pay for it yourself." "What?" he sputtered. "We have a family plan. I am separating my line next week." I said, "I was planning to tell you, this is a good time to start. You need to pay for your own devices." "You are being petty," he hissed, lowering his voice so the clerk wouldn't hear. "This is about the turkey, isn't it? You are punishing us financially because your feelings are hurt. This is not punishment." "Dad," I said, "this is adulthood. I am 35 years old. I should not be subsidizing your electronics. You have a pension. You have savings. Buy the phone if you want it." I asked the clerk to come back on the line and told him I did not authorize the purchase. I heard my father slamming his hand on the counter before the line went dead. It was ugly. It was uncomfortable. But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I felt the immense relief of not having an extra $45 drained from my account every month for a device I didn't use. Kendra, having failed with anger, switched tactics to weaponized guilt. She sent me a video of the twins, my nephews, standing by the Christmas tree. In the video, she prompted them from behind the camera. "Ask Auntie Lily where she is." Kendra's voice cooed, "Where are you, Auntie Lily?" The boys chimed in unison, "We miss you." "Come make cookies." It was a low blow. She was using innocent children as emotional hostages. She knew I loved those boys. She knew that my absence in their lives was the one thing that actually hurt me. I did not reply with a video. I did not reply with an apology. I texted Kendra directly. "Stop using the boys as pawns." "Kendra, it is gross." She replied instantly. "I am not using them. They are asking for you. They don't understand why their favorite aunt has abandoned them. How do I explain that you are too selfish to come over and bake with them?" I stared at the word selfish. It used to be my trigger word. It used to make me scramble to prove I was generous. Now, it just looked like a projection. "Tell them the truth." I texted back. "Tell them Auntie Lily is working at the hospital helping sick people. Tell them she is tired. Do not tell them I abandoned them. If you lie to them to make me look bad, I will correct the record when I see them, and I will use small words so they understand exactly why Mommy is mad." She did not reply. The thread of truth was the only thing that silenced her. But the most jarring revelation came a week before Christmas. I was at the pharmacy picking up a prescription for a sinus infection I had developed. The pharmacist, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who had known our family for 20 years, smiled when she saw me. "Oh, Lily, I am glad you are here," she said. "Your mother was in yesterday to pick up your father's heart medication and her own refill. She forgot her wallet. Poor thing. She said to just put it on your tab like last time. It is $85. I froze. My hand stopped halfway to the credit card reader. "My tab?" I asked. Mrs. Gable looked confused. "Well, not a formal tab, dear. But you know, she just said you would swing by and cover it. You usually handle their copays, don't you?" She seemed so frazzled. I didn't want to send her home without the medicine. I felt a cold flush of humiliation wash over me. It wasn't just that Mom had forgotten her wallet. It was the casual assumption that my name was good for her debts. It was the fact that she had used my reputation as the responsible one to avoid the consequences of her own disorganization, effectively spending my money without even asking me. She hadn't texted me to ask. She hadn't called to explain. She just assumed I would pay it and never bring it up. I looked at Mrs. Gable. I liked her. She was a kind woman who was just trying to help. "Mrs. Gable," I said quietly, "I will pay this today because I do not want you to be out of pocket. But please listen to me clearly. You are never to do this again. My parents are responsible for their own bills. If they forget their wallet, they need to go home and get it. Remove my credit card from the file authorized for their pickups. Today." Mrs. Gable looked shocked, her eyes widening. "Oh, I didn't realize. Of course. Lily, I am so sorry. I just thought—" "You thought what they told you to think," I said gently. "It is not your fault. But it stops now. I paid the $85. It was the last ransom payment I would ever make." That night, I sent a group email to my parents. I kept it professional, almost like a legal notice. "Dear Mom and Dad, moving forward, I am separating our finances completely. I have removed my card from the pharmacy file. I am removing myself from the family phone plan on January 1st. Do not use my name to secure services, defer payments, or make promises to vendors. If you do, I will decline the charge. Also, regarding any future help, I need 48 hours of notice for any request. If you need a ride, I need to know 2 days in advance. If you need help with a repair, I need to know 2 days in advance. And please understand that no is a possible answer. If I say no, it is final. Love, Lily." I hit send. The response was silence. No anger, no guilt trips, just a vast, echoing silence. And in that silence, I began to live. It was strange at first. I had so much free time that I didn't know what to do with it. I would wake up on my days off at 9 in the morning and feel a panic attack coming on because I wasn't rushing somewhere. I wasn't solving a problem. But slowly, the panic turned into peace. I started taking long walks in the park by the river. I watched the water flow over the rocks and realized that the river didn't need me to push it. It moved on its own. I started sleeping. Real sleep. 7, sometimes 8 hours a night. The dark circles under my eyes began to fade. My skin looked better. I had energy to go to the gym, not to punish myself, but to feel strong. I met friends for coffee and actually listened to their stories instead of checking my phone every 30 seconds to see if Dad had fallen or if Mom couldn't find the remote. One afternoon, sitting in a coffee shop with a book I had been meaning to read for 3 years, I had an epiphany that made me tear up right there in the middle of a chapter. I had always thought I was being selfish by wanting this time. I had thought that by saying no, I was taking something away from my family, but I realized I wasn't taking anything away. I was giving something back. I was giving them back their own responsibilities by fixing everything for my father. I had stolen his ability to adapt to his disability. I had made him helpless. By managing my mother's chaos, I had enabled her to remain disorganized. By catering to Kendra's demands, I had validated her narcissism. I wasn't the glue holding the family together. I was the crutch that prevented them from learning how to walk. The silence from my family wasn't just because they were mad. It was because they were busy. Dad was figuring out how to set up his own phone. Mom was remembering to bring her wallet. Kendra was actually cooking dinner for her children. The gaps I left were being filled, awkwardly and slowly, by the people who should have been filling them all along. Christmas came. I stuck to my plan. I arrived at my parents' house at 4 o'clock sharp. I brought a beautiful white box of bakery cookies. The mood was stiff. The house was not as perfectly decorated as usual. Kendra clearly hadn't had the time or the staff to do the full Pinterest explosion. The dinner was running late. The prime rib was slightly overcooked because Dad had forgotten to check the timer. But we ate. We talked. At 6 o'clock, I stood up. "I have to go." I said. "Already?" Mom asked, her eyes sad. "Yes," I said. "I have a shift early tomorrow." I hugged them. It was a stiff hug, but it was honest. I walked out to my car, and as I drove away, I didn't feel the crushing weight of guilt. I felt the lightness of a guest who had visited, brought a gift, and left before the party turned sour. I was no longer the solution. I was just Lily. And for the first time, I liked her. The 1st of November arrived on a Tuesday, bringing with it the crisp, dead-leaf smell of Ohio autumn and the inevitable digital resurrection of my sister's ambitions. For 11 months, I had lived in a state of peaceful, regulated distance. I had stuck to my rules. I saw my parents once a month for a scheduled lunch where I paid for my own meal. I did not fix their Wi-Fi. I did not drive them to appointments unless they gave me 48 hours of notice. I had become a guest in their lives rather than a utility, and the dynamic had settled into a cool, polite truce. But holidays are like magnets for dysfunction. They pull old habits out of the woodwork and dress them up in festive colors. I was in the break room at the station, pouring a cup of black coffee. When my phone vibrated, it was not a work alert. It was a WhatsApp notification. You have been added to Thanksgiving 2.0 The Redemption. I stared at the screen. The name itself was an admission of guilt, wrapped in a joke to make it palatable. Kendra had created the group. The first message appeared instantly. Hey family. I know last year was a little bumpy, but let us put that behind us. This year is going to be about healing and togetherness. I want to do a do-over dinner, bigger, better, and full of love. Let's make this the best one yet. I sipped my coffee. It was bitter. I waited for the rules. I waited for the homemade-only mandate to drop like a guillotine, but it did not come. Instead, the chat filled with enthusiastic emojis from my mother, my father, and a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Kendra was playing it smart. She had learned that posting the rules publicly gave me evidence. She had learned that putting a manifesto in writing allowed me to dismantle it with logic, so she kept the public chat vague. 10 minutes later, the private message arrived. It popped up on my screen, separate from the group, intimate and wheedling. Hey Lily. So excited for this year. Listen, I know you are busy, so I am taking care of all the decor and the sides again. I just need you to handle the main part. You know, the turkey, just to be safe. I don't trust the ovens at Mom's house to get the skin crispy, and you have that touch. Can I count on you? I looked at the words. Just to be safe. You have that touch. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She wasn't demanding. She was flattering. She wasn't ordering. She was confiding. She was trying to frame the labor of roasting a 20-pound bird as a special talent that only I possessed, rather than a grueling 6-hour chore she didn't want to do. She was also testing the fence. She was shaking the perimeter to see if my boundaries had softened over the last year. She wanted to know if the new Lily was just a phase. I set my mug down on the table. I did not type a paragraph. I did not explain my work schedule. I did not offer a compromise or a smokehouse alternative. I did not give her a single inch of surface area to latch onto. I typed one word. No. I hit send. I watched the screen. The typing bubbles appeared immediately, dancing frantically. She was probably typing a novel about family duty, about how I was holding a grudge, about how I was ruining her redemption arc. Then the bubbles stopped. She didn't send anything. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, keeping my voice calm and professional. Hello, Mom, Lily. Why are you doing this? She asked. She was already crying. It was that breathless, high-pitched weepiness that used to make my stomach knot with guilt. Now, it just made me check my watch. Doing what? Mom, I asked. Kendra just called me. She said you are refusing to help. She said you are trying to sabotage the dinner before it even starts. Lily, I am so afraid this family is going to break apart again. I can't take another holiday like last year. I leaned back in my chair. Mom, listen to me. I said, the family is not going to break apart because I said no. If the family is fragile enough to shatter because one person refuses to roast a turkey, then it is already broken. It broke because you guys refused to hear the word no. But she is trying. Mom sobbed. She is trying to make it nice. She is trying to assign me work, I corrected. I am coming to dinner. Mom, I will bring a dish. I will be polite. But I am not the caterer. If Kendra wants a turkey, she can cook it. If you want a turkey, you can cook it. She invited everyone, Mom blurted out. I paused. Who is everyone? Everyone. Mom cried. Aunt Sally from Florida, the cousins from Chicago, Great Uncle Bob. There are going to be 40 people. Lily. 40 people. We rented tables if there is no turkey. It is going to be a disaster in front of the whole extended family. I felt a cold realization wash over me. This was the escalation. This was Kendra's round 2. She knew she couldn't bully me in private anymore. She knew I didn't care about her Instagram followers, so she had upped the ante. She had invited the entire extended clan, people we hadn't hosted in a decade, to create a massive audience. She was betting on my shame. She figured that even if I didn't care about her opinion, I wouldn't dare humiliate the family in front of Great Uncle Bob and Aunt Sally. She was using 40 living, breathing human beings as a pressure cooker to force me into the kitchen. It was a gamble, a high-stakes, desperate gamble. Mom, I said, my voice dropping an octave, if you invited 40 people without securing a main course, that is poor planning. It is not my emergency. You are heartless, Mom snapped, the sadness turning instantly to anger when the guilt trip failed. You have changed. Lily, you used to be so sweet. I haven't changed. Mom, I said, I just grew a spine. I will see you on Thanksgiving. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. 40 people. That was a lot of witnesses. If I walked in empty-handed, or with a store-bought pie, the Whisper Network would be electric. Kendra would play the victim beautifully. She would be the frazzled hostess, apologizing to Aunt Sally that her sister promised to help but flaked. And I would be the villain in the corner. I needed a plan. I opened my calendar. I saw that I had the day off on Thanksgiving, which was a rarity. I could technically cook. I had the time. But if I cooked, they won. If I cooked, I taught them that if they just applied enough pressure, I would eventually fold. I navigated to the website of a local charity organization. Meals on Wheels. I knew they always needed drivers on holidays to deliver hot meals to the elderly who were homebound. I signed up for a shift from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day. Now I had a hard commitment. I had a moral obligation that outranked a family party. I couldn't be in the kitchen prepping because I would be serving the community. It was the perfect shield. But I needed more than a shield. I needed a sword. Or at least, I needed to know I wasn't walking into an ambush alone. That evening, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Aunt Marla. I smiled. Marla was the only person in the extended family who had seen the receipts from last year and called out the nonsense. Marla. Just got an invite to the redemption dinner. 40 people. Is your sister running for mayor? I texted back. She is trying to shame me into cooking the turkey. She thinks if the audience is big enough, I won't say no. Marla, I figured. Listen, kid, I am coming, and I am bringing your Uncle Jerry. And if she tries to pull that poor me routine or lies about why there is no food, I am going to ask her loudly, in front of everyone, why she didn't use her own oven. I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost brought tears to my eyes. Lily, thank you. Aunt Marla. Marla. Don't mention it. I live for drama. As long as I'm not the one causing it. Also, bring receipts. Literally. Keep them on your phone. I realized then that the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Last year, I was isolated. I was the crazy daughter ruining the vibe. This year, the truth had leaked out. The cracks in Kendra's perfect facade were visible to anyone who paid attention. I decided I would go. I wouldn't hide at a Friendsgiving this time. I wouldn't stay home. I would walk right into the lion's den. But I wasn't going to go empty-handed. Kendra wanted a main part. She wanted me to contribute something significant. I thought about what to bring. I could bring a salad. I could bring wine. But those were passive. I needed something active. I needed something that communicated my position without me having to say a word. I drove to the store, not the grocery store. but a high-end bakery in the city, the one that was famous for its packaging. Their boxes were bright pink, unmistakable, with the logo printed in giant gold letters. You could spot one of their boxes from a mile away. I placed an order for their largest, most elaborate pumpkin cheesecake. It was a masterpiece of commercial baking. It was perfect, uniform, and undeniably not homemade. But that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was the gift of clarity I was planning to deliver to Kendra. The weeks flew by. The group chat remained manic with Kendra's updates. She posted mood boards. She posted seating charts. She posted a playlist. She never mentioned the turkey again in the group. She was playing a game of chicken, assuming that my silence meant I was secretly prepping, or that I would panic at the last minute and save her. She was wrong. Thanksgiving morning arrived. It was cold and rainy. I spent 6 hours driving my car through the suburbs, delivering hot meals to seniors. I met a woman named Mrs. Higgins who held my hand and thanked me for the green beans. I met a veteran named Arthur who told me jokes while I plated his stuffing. It was real work. It was real gratitude. It filled my cup in a way that serving Kendra never had. At 3 o'clock, I went home, showered, and put on a nice dress. I picked up the bright pink bakery box. I checked my phone. I had the screenshots of Kendra's request and my no ready in a separate album. I drove to my parents' house. The street was lined with cars. It looked like a block party. I could hear the noise from the sidewalk laughter. Music, the hum of 40 people crammed into a suburban split level. I walked up the driveway. My heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from anticipation. I was about to step onto a stage that had been set for my execution, but I had rewritten the lines. I opened the front door. The heat hit me first, then the noise. The house was packed. People were everywhere holding drinks, balancing plates of appetizers, squeezing past each other in the hallway. Kendra was standing in the center of the living room, holding court. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that looked like something out of a magazine editorial. She was laughing, looking radiant, playing the perfect hostess. Then she saw me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then plastered back on, tight and strained. Her eyes darted instantly to my hands. She saw the bright pink box. She saw that I was not carrying a roasting pan. She saw that I was not covered in grease. She saw that I was calm. I walked straight toward her. The room seemed to quiet down as people noticed the arrival of the prodigal sister. "Happy Thanksgiving, Kendra," I said, my voice clear and carrying over the low hum of conversation. I held out the box. The gold logo shimmered under the chandelier. She didn't take it. She just stared at it, then at me. Where is the rest?" she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "This is it," I said, smiling. "I told you I was working until 2, but I didn't want to come empty-handed." I placed the box on the side table, right next to her homemade centerpiece. The pink cardboard clashed violently with her earth tone aesthetic. It stuck out like a neon sign. "You didn't bring it," she hissed, leaning in close so only I could hear. "You are joking. Tell me you are joking. The turkey. Where is the turkey?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I told you no. Kendra. On November 1st, remember?" Her face went white. She looked around the room. 40 people were starting to glance toward the dining room, expecting the main event. The smell in the air was of candles and perfume, not roasted meat. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine terror. "Everyone is here." "I know," I said. "That is why you should have listened." I stepped back, picking up a glass of wine from a passing tray. I took a sip. "I think Mom is looking for you," I said, and then I turned and walked toward Aunt Marla, who was standing in the corner with a wicked grin on her face, raising her glass in a silent toast. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was wait for the bang. The tension in the living room was a physical weight, heavier than the humidity of a brewing storm. I stood next to Aunt Marla, sipping my wine, watching Kendra navigate the crowded room. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting frantically toward the front door every few seconds, as if praying a delivery driver would miraculously appear with a roasted bird. But no driver was coming. I looked toward the corner of the dining room, near the buffet table where the empty platter sat waiting. There, partially hidden by a large potted fern but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for, was a tripod. It was set up with a ring light attached, positioned perfectly to capture the reveal of the meal. A separate camera was mounted on it, the red recording light blinking silently. She was filming. Even now, with 40 people crammed into her house and no main course, she was documenting the event. She was hoping to catch a moment she could edit into a heartwarming reel later. Or perhaps she was already planning the disaster content. Kendra clapped her hands together. The sound cut through the chatter of the room. "Okay, everyone," she announced. Her voice pitched a little too high, a little too brittle. "It is time to eat. Please, find your seats." The guests began to shuffle toward the rented tables that had been squeezed into the dining room and the adjacent living area. There was the scraping of chairs, the clinking of silverware, and the murmuring of hungry people ready for the main event. I didn't move. I stayed by the wall with Marla. Kendra stood at the head of the main table. She looked at me. It was a look of pure desperation, mixed with a calculated malice. She needed a scapegoat, and she needed one fast. "Lily," she called out, loud enough for all 40 people to hear. "You brought the main dish, right? I saw you come in with a box. Did you leave the turkey in the car?" The room went silent. 40 pairs of eyes turned to me. My mother looked terrifyingly pale. My father stared at his plate. They knew the truth, but they were paralyzed by the social pressure of the moment. Kendra was betting everything on this. She was banking on the idea that I would be too ashamed to say no in front of Great Uncle Bob and Aunt Sally. She thought I would stutter, apologize, or rush out to buy something, taking the blame for her lack of planning. I set my wine glass down on a coaster. I walked slowly to the buffet table where I had placed the bright pink bakery box. I placed my hand on the box. "I brought exactly what I promised. Kendra," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly across the silent room. "I brought a pumpkin cheesecake." Kendra let out a dramatic gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand. "Cheesecake," she repeated, her voice trembling with theatrical shock. "But Lily, we discussed this. I told you I was doing the sides and the decor, and you were doing the main. You promised. How could you do this to the family?" A ripple of whispers went through the room. I could hear Cousin Beth muttering something about unbelievable. I did not flinch. "I never promised you a turkey. Kendra," I said. "I told you no." I looked directly at my parents. "Mom, Dad," I said. "You were on the group chat. You saw the text on November 1st. You saw the text on November 5th. When Kendra asked me to cook the turkey, what did I say?" My mother looked down at her lap, twisting her napkin. She couldn't speak. I said no. I continued. I said it clearly. I said it repeatedly. "I told you I was working a charity shift until 2 in the afternoon. Kendra slammed her hand onto the table. Tears began to stream down her face. It was a flawless performance. "You are ruining Thanksgiving," she screamed. "You are doing this on purpose to hurt me. You knew how important this was. You knew we had guests. You are so selfish. Lily, you just want to embarrass me." She was winning. I could feel the room swaying toward her. To an outsider, it looked like a sisterly miscommunication where the cold-hearted career woman had let down the overwhelmed mother. Then, Aunt Marla stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She adjusted her glasses and looked down the length of the table at Kendra. "Cut the act." "Kendra," Marla said. Her voice was like gravel and cigarettes, cutting through the sobbing. Aunt Marla Kendra gasped. "I said cut it," Marla repeated. "We are not idiots. You are the hostess. You invited 40 people. You sent out the invitations. You picked the color scheme. Since when is it the guest's job to cater the main course?" Marla pointed a manicured finger at the empty platter. "Where is your turkey?" Kendra. "You have an oven. You have hands. If Lily said no 3 weeks ago, why is that oven empty? Were you waiting for her to magically manifest a bird out of thin air, or were you just too lazy to do it yourself?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear a pin drop. Kendra's face turned a blotchy red. I I didn't have time, she stammered. I was busy with the table. I was busy with the boys. I trusted Lily. You trusted her to do your job, Marla corrected. Mason, my brother-in-law, stood up then. His face was flushed. That is not fair, Marla, he said. Lily knows that Kendra is building a business. This isn't just a dinner. It is part of her work. Lily should have supported that. I looked at Mason. He had just handed me the key to the lock. Work, I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had the screenshot ready. It wasn't the email from last year. It was a new one I had found. Because once you know where to look, the evidence is easy to find. Kendra used a public email address for her business inquiries, and she had been careless with her forward chaining on a message she sent to Mom earlier in the week about the guest list. I held the phone up. Is this the work you are talking about? Mason, I asked. I read from the screen. Project Brief Traditional Family Gathering Campaign. Client Home Hearth Kitchenware. Deliverables. 160-second reel featuring the golden roast turkey preparation using the new roasting pan. Must feature authentic family reactions. Bonus payout for saving the day narrative if obstacles arise. I lowered the phone. I looked at the tripod in the corner. The homemade-only rule wasn't about tradition. I said to the room, it was a contract clause. You needed someone to roast a turkey so you could film it and sell pans. And when I said no, you didn't cancel the dinner. You decided to pivot to the saving the day narrative, or maybe the victim narrative. I walked over to the tripod and pointed at the blinking red light. Is it rolling right now? Kendra, I asked. Are you getting your authentic family reaction? Kendra looked like she was about to be sick. She slumped into her chair. Mason looked defeated. It is work, Lily, he muttered. But the fight had gone out of him. It pays the mortgage. Then pay a caterer, I snapped. If it is a business, treat it like a business. Don't treat your family like unpaid interns and then shame them when they quit. I looked at my father. He was staring at the tripod. His face was a mask of confusion that was slowly resolving into realization. Dad, I said softly, last year, the fight, the turkey, it was the same thing. It was never about you. It was never about Grandma's recipe. It was about a video. My father looked at Kendra. Is that true? He asked. His voice was quiet, hoarse. Kendra didn't answer. She was sobbing into her hands. Then, in the midst of her breakdown, the truth finally bubbled up. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession of incompetence that was almost funny in its tragedy. I had one, she wailed. I had a turkey. We all looked at her. What Mom asked. I ordered one, Kendra cried, lifting her tear-streaked face. I knew Lily wouldn't do it. I knew she was being stubborn. So I ordered a pre-cooked one from the grocery store. I was going to put it in the roasting pan and garnish it and pretend I made it. Then where is it? Marla asked. I forgot to pick it up, Kendra screamed. I was setting up the lights. I was trying to get the table runner to lay flat for the opening shot. I spent 3 hours adjusting the lighting on the centerpiece, and I lost track of time. By the time I remembered, the store was closed. She buried her face in her hands again. I wanted it to be perfect. She moaned. I looked at the pathetic scene. A woman so obsessed with the image of a perfect dinner that she had forgotten the actual dinner. She had prioritized the lighting over the food. She had prioritized the camera over the family. I felt the last vestige of anger drain out of me, replaced by a profound pity. I walked back to the table and picked up the pink box. I opened it. Inside was a beautiful, rich pumpkin cheesecake. I went to the kitchen, found a knife, and started slicing it. There is no turkey, I announced to the room, but there is cheesecake, and there are 40 people here who look hungry. I started handing out plates. My father stood up. He walked over to the tripod. He didn't smash it. He didn't throw it. He simply reached out, turned the camera off, and folded the legs. He leaned it against the wall, lens facing the corner. Then he walked over to me. He looked older than he had a moment ago. He looked at the cheesecake, then at me. I am sorry. Lily, he said. It wasn't a grand speech. It was 3 words. But they were the first real words he had spoken to me in years. I know. Dad, I said. My mother came over next. She looked at Kendra, who was still weeping at the head of the table, comforted by Mason. Then she looked at me. You were right, she whispered, to say no. I nodded. I handed her a slice of cake. Eat, Mom, I said. It is store-bought, but it is real. The dinner was a disaster by Kendra's standards. We ate side dishes. We ate salad. We ordered 10 large pizzas from the only place that was open. We ate cheesecake. But the atmosphere had changed. The tension was broken. The performance was over. Without the camera, without the pretense of the perfect homemade meal, people actually started talking. Uncle Jerry told stories about his time in the Navy. Marla made fun of the pizza delivery guy. The cousins laughed. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was completely off-brand. And it was the best Thanksgiving we had had in a decade. Before I left that evening, I found Kendra in the kitchen. She was washing dishes. Her gold dress stained with water. She wasn't filming. She didn't look at me. Next time, I said, leaning against the doorframe, if you want to make a video, hire actors. Family is for eating, not for content. She nodded, a small, jerky motion. And Kendra, I added. She looked up. Her eyes were swollen. The cheesecake was delicious. I said, I walked out to my car. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and clean. I realized as I drove home that I didn't hate my family. I loved them. I just hated the version of myself that existed when I was with them. But that version was gone now. I had buried her under a pile of boundaries and a store-bought cheesecake. The new rule was simple. Whoever makes the law carries the load. If you want a feast, you cook it. If you want a video, you film it. And if you want Lily, you ask her respectfully, and you accept her answer. I turned on the radio and sang along to a classic rock song all the way home. I was alone, but for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while cooking, driving, or just relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more satisfying revenge tales, please subscribe to the channel Helena Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to me.